So, this person in the comments asked me to make a video on Miss Bellum and Sedusa, drawing possible comparisons between them and doing some analysis. And I'm nothing if not kind. So, Christian EG, I so hope you watch this video. God help me, I will. Two characters who are two sides of one coin. I'm talking about Miss Sarah Bellum, the mayor's secretary, and Sedusa, the sexy criminal from the animated series The Powerpuff Girls. I'm going to be diving into their origins, similarities, differences, with the add into the show finally leading to the much anticipated catfight. Let's start with their debut episodes. Surprisingly enough, both these characters appear in the very first episode of the series, titled Monkey See, Doggy Do / Mommy Fearest. Miss Bellum appears in the former, while Sedusa appears in the latter. However, Miss Bellum's debut episode doesn't tell us much about her, since the time when the camera finally decided to zoom in on her, she was already a dog. However, Sedusa's debut episode had a pretty fleshed out arc. A quick summary of the episode Mommy Fearest would be that Sedusa disguises herself into an innocent woman who infatuates the professor in order to be the girls' stand-in mom so she could control them. She puts a curfew on the girls that prohibits them from saving Townsville at night.
We were out fighting crime! That's what we do! Duh!
That's it! You three are grounded!
Thus leading her to effectively carry out her robbery at night, chaos-free. Something interesting that I've noticed about both Miss Bellum and Sedusa is that their names are indicative of their character. Miss Sarah Bellum, which sounds an awful lot like cerebellum, that's a part of our hindbrain. And I know I'm not the first person to comment that Miss Bellum's head, what is visible of it at least, looks like a human brain. Her long neck serves as the brainstem, while her curly poofy hair takes the outline of a human brain. And who is it that runs Townsville? Who is it that writes that Big Baby's election speeches and proofreads his documents for him? Who is it that's the brain behind that poor excuse of a mayor? Yeah, I think I got my point across. And it's the same thing with Sedusa. Her alias or fake name in episode 1 is I'm a Good Lady. Ima being her first name, Good Lady being her last name.
Hi! What's your name?
Miss Good Lady. Miss I'm a Good Lady.
And this disguise of hers was meant to be that of an innocent PR woman who wanted to enamor the professor enough to make him make her the girl's stand-in mom. And do I even have to elaborate on the name Sedusa? She's a sexy criminal who seduces people to achieve her gains. And honestly, this trope of naming characters after their qualities or personality has actually very widely been used in literature. It was especially prominent in the literature that was produced in England during the Restoration era. Oh my gosh, would you look at that? I remember something from my English major classes back in college. I guess that degree wasn't a complete waste. Before I move on to the next point, I want you to look at this clip and notice how she says superpowers.
Superpowers!
Doesn't she sound like the Brad Morbucks?
Especially the Powerpuff Girls!
I mean, she's acting like her and sounding like her. So I did a quick Google search and would you look at that? They actually have the same voice actress. Anyway, let's move on to draw some more parallels between them. They both have hourglass bodies that serve the male gaze, and the camera graciously checks their bodies out. Male gaze is essentially the way men look at women. Men's gaze often tend to hover above women's so-called assets in order to objectify them. We have panels that focus on both Miss Bellum and Sedusa's ass, their cleavage, and do a once-over of their legs, and it's no secret that some motivation that went behind in making their character was fan service. And I know the joke in Miss Bellum's case is that she's only valued for her body even though she is the brains. Regardless, her body is there for the viewer to look at. And the camera's eye is inevitably the viewer's eye, more so the adult viewer of the show. Powerpuff Girls has a lot of jokes that would go over kids' heads but be completely understood by adults.
Whenever their masculinity is threatened, They shrink in size.
Scopophilia is defined as the pleasure in looking, and characters like Miss Bellum and Sedusa appease the male gaze. But then here comes the question. What is the need to appeal to the male gaze in the first place? And oh my friend, are you in for a ride? So, according to some psychologist called Sigmund Freud, men apparently experience this thing called castration anxiety, which means losing their penis. It's a patriarchal world where men rule and they know this. And their penis is what that essentially makes them a man, although trans people would disagree. And so their penis then becomes a signifier of their power, status, and prestige. Then there are women or people who don't have a penis, and we see that they're oppressed and marginalized. So we then become the signifiers of oppression because we lack the penis. So subconsciously, men are afraid of losing their penis and as a result, losing their power. And looking at women who are penisless creatures reminds them of that. So to distract men from this brewing castration anxiety, cinema, when showing women on the big screen, tends to focus on their body parts and tends to sexualize them. When we don't see a character's face, but only a close-up of their body parts, we stop recognizing them as individuals and instead we start to objectify them. Hence, both Miss Bellum and Sedusa appeals to the male gaze, and also they both have the color scheme red, and red is widely considered to represent lust, sensuality, etc. Another similarity between both these characters is that they're both women who are competent and independent. They know the means to get to their end. Remember when I said in the beginning that they're both two sides of one coin? Miss Bellum and Sedusa are essentially parallels to each other. I'll explain what I mean by this, but let's first analyze Season 2, Episode 25, Something's Amiss. And this title again throws us back to Episode 1, where the narrator actually prophesied this episode.
And it is that kind of attitude that is going to change around here.
Uh-oh, something is amiss.
So in this episode, Sedusa holds Miss Bellum hostage and impersonates as Miss Bellum and seduces the mayor. She sexually strides towards him and pulls him closer to her while he's listening to some god-awful techno music that has the melody of a broken glass. She asks for the afternoon off, to which the mayor freaks out and says this.
Could I take the rest of the afternoon off?
The rest of the afternoon? I don't know, Miss Bellum. There's so much to do and so little time.
Yes, the same guy who was listening to this.
The pity of...
She then kisses the mayor on the nose, entrances him, and waddles off. Then we see the mayor sitting still as the entire day passes, probably afraid of moving because he thinks he's dreaming again. It's not the real deal, and he's scared of moving because that would wake him up from his dream. Anyways, he's sitting still and there happens a robbery, but no one was there to call the Powerpuff Girls. Then the next day, Sedusa, disguised as Miss Bellum, again dawdles into the office and asks for an entire afternoon off. And then
Let me
this
help you with
happens. I don't even know how this scene got passed. So, pencil is a phallic symbol. Not only because it looks like a penis, but also because it represents literacy and education. And education traditionally used to be the domain of the man, and even now, in lots of parts of the world, women's right to education is still infringed upon. Or maybe it's just the English literature kid in me talking, it's probably not that deep. Anyways, so Miss Bellum puts pencil, that's a phallic structure, into this hole, and then we hear some vibrations, and dare I say, the mayor being hit by waves of pleasure. Oh my god, it's so cringe to even talk about this! Then we hear the mayor's orgasmic sigh, and his pencil being short, which probably represents his something that rhymes with a rock, is deflated now.
My little penis, my little penis.
Anyways, the pattern repeats 3 times where Sedusa disguised as Miss Bellum seduces the mayor, nobody calls the Powerpuff Girls during emergencies, and places are robbed. Then after the 3rd time, the mayor gets a fax from Sedusa saying she has held Miss Bellum hostage, and then finally the mayor rings the hotline and calls the girls. Also, I would like to point out real quick that for the past few days, Mayor was sitting still as a rock. Like, Townsville could have been crushed by a monster and he would have been none the wiser. But Miss Bellum, she finally pulls him to ring the hotline and call the girls. Mayor is a sick person, I swear. So coming back to Miss Bellum and Sedusa being 2 sides of one coin, we see that they're both competent, independent, brave, smart, and are not afraid to raise a hand. Along with sharing physical appearances, they also share some common traits. Yet there are differences which are subtle, but really they set them apart. Let's get into what each of them represents. So, Sedusa is a woman that has taken autonomy over her own body. She's not embedded into some virtue of purity, and I think the obsession with purity culture, where a woman should be a virgin when she's married, it's very dangerous because, again, it's imposing societal expectations on what women can do with their bodies, and again, it's infringing their right of autonomy over their own bodies. Now, does this mean I support fucking 100 men in one day? Nope. Does this mean I shame people who wait until marriage? Also, no. Feminism doesn't tell you whether to keep your virginity or lose it. It's all about choice. Sedusa's autonomy is that she preys upon men to achieve her deplorable goals, and Miss Bellum's bodily autonomy is that she reserves the access to her body. Like, we have no idea about her personal life except the fact that she lives in this big mansion. So you see, they both are exercising their bodily autonomies, but in different ways. However, there's one stark difference between Miss Bellum and Sedusa, and that is Miss Bellum is a representation of what's acceptable in society, and Sedusa is a representation of what's not acceptable in society. Miss Bellum, she fits the beauty standard, only appears next to the mayor, and even then, she's always standing behind the mayor, echoing the message that a woman's place is always behind a man. And like, her standing behind the mayor could have been excusable and acceptable had she been a secretary to some competent mayor, but our mayor is a dumbass. She is the one who runs Townsville, but she's never credited for it. In episode 3 of the series titled Octi Evil, there's a scene where the mayor asks Miss Bellum to get back to work while he probably, plans to eat a pickle or something.
Well, Miss Bellum, you can get back to work now.
Miss Bellum is a docile figure. Yes, I know, she beats the crap out of Sedusa, to which we would get into a minute, but essentially she's docile, which is again substantiated by this clip.
Do you know what it is that makes a man, girls? Bellum.
What?
Miss Sarah Bellum. The brains behind the man.
It's the same narrative that says behind every man there's a woman, and how women are the backbone of society, and I think it's time that we interfere with this narrative. Yes, there's nothing wrong with being a backbone, as it is the foundation on which other things are built, but when you emphasize this narrative, it's like backbone is all women can be, and anything else they want to be, it's like stepping out of line. Why can we only be the backbone and not be the brain? And I know Miss Bellum is represented as the brain, but she's essentially the mayor's brain. Why can't we be the drivers of the car while men be the tires that lead us to our destination for once? This narrative speaks that sacrificing and helping a man succeed is the woman's success, and the only success she's ever allowed to accomplish. Sedusa, on the other hand, plays men. She played the mayor, and all these traits are not something that I condone, but I also think you have to be pretty stupid like the mayor if you fall for such tricks. She is bold, unapologetic, and takes the reins, and she cannot be tamed. And oh my gosh, a woman that cannot be controlled, a catastrophe. And a lot of times in cinema, the women who are bold, who stand up to men, or have multiple body counts like Sedusa, are often given the roles of villains, and then that justifies subduing them and prevents us from actively liking them, because at the end of the day, they're evil. Powerpuff Girls gave us another example of the same fact. Femme Fatale, the female villain that appeared in season 3, episode 21, and she was a feminazi. However, she did put forward some legitimate questions.
Who besides you is a heroine in her own right?
There's Wonder Woman and, Wonder Woman? She's right! There is no one else!
Anyways, now we come to the much anticipated cat fight. So the girls figure out that Sedusa is impersonating as Miss Bellum, and Bubbles rips her wig off, which is again a callback to episode 1 where Bubbles had again ripped Sedusa's wig off. We get this montage of them fighting until we reach the duel. Bellum versus Sedusa. If I have to describe their fight, I would say Miss Bellum is the bull and Sedusa is the red flag, and this is a full-on raging bullfight, especially because of this instance at 10:23. Like, look at Sedusa in her hand. So we get some kicking and some punching and some slapping, and initially Miss Bellum was getting creamed. However, at this instance at 10:23, when Sedusa provoked the bull, she got the horns. Miss Bellum, she tackled Sedusa with the speed I used to get out from my college classes. Like, I used to run the first chance I got. Anyway, she tackled her, boom, they fall into the pool, and then we get an underwater duel. There's again some kicking and some punching and some slapping until Miss Bellum realizes that Sedusa's hair, after being soaked with water, has lost their power. So then she releases the girls, and then along with the girls, they give Sedusa the ultimate, most brutal punishment that could ever be given to womankind, ripping her hair off her skull.
So once again, the day is saved thanks to Miss Bellum and the Powerpuff Girls, the cuties of Townsville.